As we chatted about earlier, the Accelerate Success Story program has three key ingredients. We talked about leadership challenges and how these core issues show up time and time again in patterns that we've seen across these different times with our clients. We've talked about the power of experiential knowledge through the experiments and the practices that the program is based upon. The final ingredient we're going to talk about here today are your SocioNeural styles. What are they, why they matter, and how they're relevant to the Success Story program. David, why don't you give us an overview of what these styles are and how you discovered them and how they show up as such a key part of our program here?
Yeah, sounds good. So the three styles, just to define them first, and then I'll talk a little bit about them as a whole later. There is the head SocioNeural style, the head-brain SocioNeural style, the heart-brain SocioNeural style, and the gut-brain SocioNeural style. And this really comes from, I was looking into some neuroscience research. I mean, neuroscience was my original love. That's what that was my major in college. That's what I graduated with. And I've always had this affinity for including some kind of, neuroscience evidence-based practices as part of my coaching. To my delight, in around 2013, I discovered, there's been quite a bit of work done on the little brains that are inside the heart, the little brains that are inside the gut, and the neocortex, the brain, the big brain that's in the very front of our head brain there. So, I recognize that, wow, they're so very different. This research is very clear that they have different memories, they have different ways of making sense of things. And I just reflected on my clinical work with people, not just my coaching work, but my former work as a psychotherapist. And I found, wow, I could easily, see people having this take on reality that's particularly impactful in communications. So communications are such an important part of everyday life, and especially business. We have ways of hearing, but we have ways of not hearing. And that became even more clear when I started running behavior change experiments with people when I first became a coach. And I was like, I did not say this, and the end result was that, and running the experiment in this way. So I just started to get more clear about what I was trying to say and what I was not trying to say to people. And after I was researching these three brains, I was like, that I think that had something to do with my being heard or not heard. So let's take the head brain, for example. People who orient more to what's called the cephalic brain, their SocioNeural style is more head-oriented. They tend to be more abstract, more cognitive, also more creative. But they might ignore diplomacy. They might ignore pragmatism. Heart-brain style. I am more heart-brain style. The cardiac brain, right? That's my SocioNeural style. So I'm going to orient to bonding, to emotions, to warmth, agreeability. I've had to learn to be disagreeable. I'm pretty good now. Don't tell me I'm not. But what might someone like me ignore, right? I might ignore clarity. I might ignore results on behalf of those heart-brain styles, the heart-brain style outcomes that I'm interested in particular, the outcomes of a communication. How do I start my communications? How do I end my communications? And then take someone with a gut brain. They're going to be focused on pragmatism, instinct, intuition, outcomes. So that SocioNeural style, the gut SocioNeural style, they might ignore dialogue. They might ignore creativity because they're very focused on outcomes, on data and on outcomes. So those are the three styles. And one thing that I want to end with here in my start to this conversation is a lot of what we are doing with the Success Story program is taking what happens in a unique one-on-one coaching arc and reverse engineering it. So you and I know that after we create a development plan for someone, something that's not just about their state of consciousness, but about the structures of consciousness, about their vertical growth and the depth, those deep structures that are habits that they carry with them into every situation, which are very difficult to sort of look at because we're so used to looking through them as our lens into the world and into experiences. So what are the common patterns at the end of that, one-on-one, unique to that person coaching arc? And so the leadership challenges came from that, but so did these SocioNeural styles, because in running experiments with people, it became clear to me that, oh, the style that they're using to approach this behavior change matters to that person. It matters very much. The details definitely matter when it comes to creating experiments, behavior experiments that are going to teach us something about ourselves. Do I still need to be this safe? That's fundamentally the most important question that we are trying to help people answer. How safe do I have to be? Oh, maybe not as safe as I thought. That means this risk that I thought was very high is actually not as high. And so the benefits of taking this risk all of a sudden become much more of a grab to that person. So by overlaying the person's SocioNeural style along with the leadership challenges, the most common leadership challenges, we're giving people a plug and play system that they can self-identify as, oh, that's most like me. And so instead of having to build it from the ground up, we offer them an opportunity to accelerate, you might say, that process.
Excellent. Yeah, so to recap, you, based on your neuroscience training and further investigations, you've been tracking research that shows that there are these clusters of nerves or neurons in our gut, in our heart, as well as the more commonly understood brain, and that these have a certain amount of operating control about how we show up in the world. And so we're using the word brains. It's not like we have little walnut-sized ripply brains located in our heart and gut, but these are centers of operation. Yes. And one of the core
technically they are ganglia. They meet the definition of brain.
of the actual gray matter. So, but one of the core things that we really want to emphasize here, and David touched upon this, is that leadership at its core is a social function. You're not a leader if you're just always in a room by yourself. Now, who's following you? Who are you influencing? What's the team? What's the success that you're building? So you may be a great individual contributor or a designer or a founder, but you're not a leader outside of that social function. And how do we relate with people? And what do we prioritize in the relating with people? And our style, which brain we're using, is going to determine that. And we see that with language, like David was so clearly articulating. How do you start these conversations? What matters to you? What are you pointing at? And as much as these styles allow us to sort of lean into our strengths, they also limit us by rendering other things less visible. Like Dave gave some great examples there. Somebody who's really gut-oriented may not really understand the importance of relationships with the person they're talking to, who's a more heart-oriented person, and they'll feel like they're just not getting it, or this person they don't agree with me about how important this project is. And the other person may be like, wow, they just don't really care about people. They just want to get numbers. And like, you could really have these disconnects. And so the style is so critical here because we encourage people to lean into those strengths, and let's leverage your style to help your growth be more effective. But let's also increase the range of your behavior patterns across some of these styles and your fluency with some of these other non-native styles, because all of that will definitely increase your net leadership effectiveness, especially in working through this current challenge, which is going to necessarily involve the people around you as you're doing your experiment. So it really is a additional powerful point of leverage in the success story program.
Yeah.